Hello, and welcome to another live edition of Faith Unaltered. I'm here with my host, Tyler Fowler,
What's
in
up?
the flesh.
What
in
is
the
up?
world? What's going on, brother?
Bro, it's amazing to get here. It's amazing to just be here live in the flesh, fellowshipping with my brother in Christ, David Russell. And we got Josh with us. I saw Josh cheesing for the entire intro while we've been talking. And so, brother, it's good to see you. And how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. How's my sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm doing all right. Just chilling, hanging out with my daughter and watching some, the kids like to watch videos on YouTube and stuff, right? And my daughter is really into watching, like these toy videos where people play with the toys of the shows that they like. They don't even want to watch the shows anymore. They want to watch somebody else play with toys from the shows that they like.
Right,
it's so
right.
abstract. It's so
I know,
weird, bro.
it's crazy.
So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Nice. So Tyler's been with me all week.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, we've hit the
All
place.
week.
And you know what? Travis said this, man, come on up, brother. Anytime, man. I'll host you.
He's an excellent host. I mean, this dude has taken care of. This dude has fed us. This dude has put us up in a place, awesome bed, comfortable. I mean, you couldn't ask for any better. Completely Christ-like. I love my man, and I definitely owe him the world after this.
So
how much you pay you to say that, bro?
So Tyler, tell me what you have enjoyed about the vacation.
Where do you begin, man? I mean, we have hit up DC. We've hit up King's Dominion. We've went to the Bible Museum, the Museum of the Bible. We've done it all. We've sightseen. We've seen the mountains. We've drove through horrendous mountains. I will tell you this, David. I hate driving through the mountains. It sucks. I don't recommend it to anyone. Okay? Don't drive through the mountains. With that being said, DC was amazing. We walked, I don't know, how far did we walk yesterday?
About 10 miles.
It's a walk in DC. We did some footage. We went live on TikTok. For those who aren't following us live on TikTok, go follow us live on TikTok. We do like stuff like that. And so we saw the Washington Monument. We went down the mall. We got some $44 hot dogs. That was expensive.
What?
Yes.
We had to preface this, we did have 2 cheeseburgers. We also had other things as well.
A street vendor cost, what was it, 6 people? $44.
Yeah.
So it was really good. Like, it was worth it.
Oh, so it wasn't $44 per hot dog.
No.
Boy,
bro,
there's
we're
an
not
interpretive issue for you.
Okay, so
narrative
he's got
space.
3 with him. I had 4 with me. No, 5. Did I have 5? Yeah, we have 5.
Yeah.
And we all ate for $44. So I mean,
Yep.
it wasn't that bad. But
it was a street vendor.
It was
bro.
a street vendor.
It was a street
But that's
vendor.
what happens when you get a dirty water dog. That he learned his first dirty water dog.
Yeah.
Dirty
The
water
guy's
dog.
like, dirty water dog, and I'm just sitting here like, I'm from Indiana, bud. We don't know about dirty water dogs up there. And so it was really good. That was what was it called? A half smoked?
Yep.
And
It's a half smoked.
chili
man.
cheese, onions. Recommend it. Get
Yeah,
it.
it was good stuff, man. It was good stuff. I had to let you try that, man. That's an experience when you go to DC to have a dirty water dog.
Got to.
Dirty water dog is the best. Especially with chili, cheese, and onions. You got to have it on there, man. It's not the same without. So what's the best part so far, man?
The Bible, the Museum of the Bible.
Yeah, that was awesome, man.
Josh, is our volume any better? You said that we were kind of quiet.
Yeah, you guys sound great now. Yeah.
Okay,
awesome. Okay, good.
Awesome.
But
yeah, go ahead.
The Museum of the Bible, we saw P75. So I got a picture of P75, and just to see, like, it says it's dated between 200, 300, and just to see, though, like, taking Greek, and granted, I'm no scholar, I'm a novice, like this guy says, but at the same time, like, just to see the words kaitheos and halagos. Man, you just don't get any cooler than that. Like, that's why I love the Museum of the Bible. And so I love textual tradition. I love everything, the history of Christianity, and you get the whole thing there. The thing that I regret, David, I will say this. The thing that I regret, we didn't get to see the Shroud of Turin. It was on floor 5. We were there, but we just
It
didn't
was
have
an
enough time.
exhibit. Of course, they're not going to ever
were
move
closed,
the
right?
real one
Yeah.
from
Well,
Turin.
but still, though,
But
like,
yeah, I would love to see the Shroud exhibit because there's a lot of stuff that's coming out now for it. And
Yeah.
I'd love to see it. But with no further ado, let me tell you guys something. You see this wine bottle sitting here. The first
he's
thing
turned me into
Tyler
an alcoholic.
did, yeah, the first thing Tyler did was get drunk while he was here. No, I'm just joking. We
Oh,
did. They came
That's
up to.
yours, right?
We were bottling. Yes, that's mine. We were bottling that day. Our next 30 bottles. He actually helped me build my wine rack at home.
right there, you can't
but
see it. But
That's the first
You
thing
can't
they
see it.
did. We met at the winery, gave each other
Funny.
hugs, came in, tried some wines.
Yep.
The owner, our teacher, Hal Bell at Bacchus Winery.
Super
I'm
cool
throwing
dude.
it out. He set them up, man. He gave them Virginia wines and sweet wines and said, hey, try these, to see which ones you like. And they walked out with a couple bottles. I was really impressed. They really liked it. So, but tonight, we're going to try Russell's Rosé,
Now,
as you can see.
just to be clear, David did make this wine himself. He started it. Like, this ain't bought. David started it from start to finish. And this is all him, bro. And
Yeah, man.
I got to admit, it's good. This guy's a chef. Y'all didn't know that, but this dude is a chef. He's cooked a steak. We grilled out fresh bread. He from scratch bread, right? Cheese, garlic. Oh, it was amazing. And sirloin. He's a chef. Eggs Benedict. Like, I had no idea what Eggs Benedict was, and bam, there you go. Like, I've never had it. You know what I mean? We're from Indiana. We're very, very, very simple. And just give me some eggs. Like, that's all I care
Come on,
about.
there's got to be some classy cooks in Indiana, bro.
Well, there are, but not in Petersburg. we're a town of 12,000 people, bro. Like,
consider this a challenge. I hope somebody steps up and I am the fancy cook of Petersburg.
If you see it.
All right, so I
Petersburg,
taught Tyler a little bit how to drink wine. See, wine's an art. It's not just a drink and be merry thing. There's a flavor profile. So I told him a little about it. So I'm going to let him smell it, get the aromas, and tell me what he tastes.
It's fruity all of a sudden, just. It's screaming fruit at me, like cherries.
Bingo. There's one. That's a rosé item.
So cherries,
raspberries.
Yeah,
citrus. A little citrusy there. So yeah, that's one of the things you want to.
It's not as dry, right? Like, I don't know all these fancy wine terminologies, right?
He just said one.
I just learned dry, and I know what that means. It's the opposite of sweet, right? And so it's very dry. It's not bad though. It's really good.
I'm glad you like it. So yeah, we're here.
Cheers, mates.
To do an open mic night and take questions, field questions.
Hey, Rob Rowe is.
Yeah, I was gonna say Rob's in the chat, bro,
and he's saying, "Shall I join?" And I say,
"You're more than welcome,
Robert,
brother.
You should." Here, check this out. So I'm just gonna go ahead and post the link. If anyone wants to join, this is an open mic. Feel free to click the link, and you'll be on. And we'll kick you if you get crit. No, I'm just fine. But I mean, we will. But
hey, David, my wife is asking what it would take to get one of those bottles at our place.
About $75.95.
I don't know. I think there's some legality shipping homemade wine to other people. I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I'll look it up, and if I can, I'll get your address.
Way.
Robert, check the comments for the link to join us, and that goes for anyone else. If you would like to join us, please click the link in the comment section. Thank you, and have a good day. Thank you for flying Faith Unaltered.
But I think my favorite part of this vacation so far is our long theological talks into the night.
It's like a fairy tale. It ends with the long theological whatever, you name it, right? We've been talking. Josh, and I brought you up the other night. David and I were talking, and I brought you up, and David said that I was good at one thing, and that's asking questions. And I said it's because I learned from Josh. Josh taught me to ask questions, right?
Well, thank you.
Like, I love you, dude, for that. And so that's the thing. If I see Rob, what's up, brother? Welcome back.
Good evening, guys.
You get to hang out with David tonight too. So you missed him last time, bro.
Yeah,
we just
man.
did an episode with you, Rob, and David missed out. So I'm excited you get to be here tonight.
Right.
Yeah, man, it's fun.
No, it's good to see you, brother. Yeah. No, I just got off a stream myself like half an hour ago, interviewing
Nice.
Hugh Ross. So
How did that go?
Yeah.
Very good. I think it was. I designed it to be. I called it a snapshot. So I designed it so that because he's releasing a new book next month.
Yeah.
And I just thought, let's just sort of do like a snapshot through the years. So like say the last 40 years of science research, and he's really appreciative of that. And interview was only about 90 minutes, but
Okay.
yeah, very good.
Determined
So-
to the core, right?
Design to the core.
Design to the core, not
But
determined.
you could
So
you could
we've
you
been
could tie.
Go ahead.
No, but you could title it that way. Like determined
Okay.
to the core is like, yeah, he's determining it right to the core, right? So
Fair enough. We've
That's
been
basically
talking,
what Stratton said the other day on the episode. He was like, yeah, most everything, pretty much, like the universe, the design argument. Yeah, it goes that,
exactly.
yeah.
We've been talking Molinism, determinism, as if anyone had to ask. So anyway,
Yeah, dude, I'm totally jealous of like you guys being able to be in the same space at the same time
it's nice.
and have
Yeah.
like, because you guys are, here's the thing. I've talked to both of you guys, and I've talked to Tyler loads of times,
Yeah.
separate from shows and on the phone and video chat and whatever. It's different to be able to be in the same space because you guys are sharing a communion that's different than being in a digital space, right?
Yeah,
You're being
we're
really-
partaking in a narrative.
yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, that's actually one way of looking at it.
participating.
It's
Yeah.
part of the ritual. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why you can. That's why being in the same space is really actually more. I feel like it's just more,
Yeah,
like
there's
to be able to be in each other's presence and share like dialogos, right?
Right.
Yep. And
Oh,
one
Jealous, seriously.
And why?
that I
Lord
made.
forgive me. I'm coveting.
So we can be like Eucharistic, right? So David made homemade bread a while ago, and now we're drinking his homemade wine. So this is just, you don't get any better fellowship than Christian fellowship. That's all I'm trying to say, guys.
Mhm.
So this comment's for Rob.
Already.
Look at that. He's just
Oh,
talking
Roden.
about it.
Hey, brother. It's good to see you, man. Blessings to you. Like, Roden emailed me. I need to reply to email. Just backlog of emails I need to reply to. But
Sorry, I was drinking. What's his
Yeah.
question?
He didn't have a question. He was just telling him
Oh,
that he hooked him up and watched his interview.
thanks for the tip.
That's so awesome. So, like, I know you differ from Hugh, but where do you stand? And I know I haven't finished watching the episode you guys did. So I know you were talking about the flood, and maybe we should kick it off with the flood, or where do you want to kick it off at, Tyler?
I want to know Josh's view on the flood. You have gotten out of your view on every episode we've had on this, and I want to know finally where you stand while I'm here in the flesh with David. Where do you stand on this subject, bro?
And we got Rob here to correct him.
Wow.
Yes, and me.
actually,
Well-
Josh did a fantastic job meeting me halfway there, right? Like summarizing my point. I think he did a great job doing that.
Well, I try to thank you, by the way, but I try to listen very carefully to what people are saying.
Mhm.
And here's the thing: it's that kind of listening is a skill that needs to be honed by everybody, and it's something that should come on the house, whether you agree with that person or not. I should be able to listen carefully enough to what you're saying that if I go, okay, so this, and this, you go, yup, that's it. You're tracking. It's like then I know that I can say I either agree or disagree. Otherwise, that's a stupid thing to say to somebody. I agree or disagree. I'm not even hearing what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing to hone in like every kind of conversation. Like let's say you're negotiating with your boss, you still have to know what you're talking about,
Right.
So I think that the flood thing is kind of Well, the creation account to me is really like a beautiful summary statement in some sense. I think that when God is trying to convey himself through let's say phenomenologically the human perspective, because I think we kind of agree that that's what's happening, is ultimately you have God trying to articulate to human, right? It's like we are so finite, it's ridiculous, right? Like I'm stuck in this embodied platform so much that I have a hard time imagining what it would be to be anything other than something that maybe shares the same amount of limbs as me, has the similar eye as me. It's like I have to be able to map on something. Like I have no point of reference for what it would be like to be an octopus. And so it's like my understanding is so limited. It's so honed in that God has these ridiculous parameters in trying to convey anything to me, right? And so to do it in such a way that it can be like of infinite depth while also being so ridiculously simple is like, I think that's my favorite part about it. But it, like the question of whether or not it should be interpreted literally, historically, mythically, whatever. I think that making the separation isn't entirely useful. That's honestly my view, is that I don't think ancient people made this same kind of stark distinction that we do between things that would have been considered like enacting a myth versus experiencing something supernatural versus some scientific explanation for the mechanism behind what was experienced. And it's like that was all one thing to them. They didn't break it into pieces and have to dissect it like a corpse just to put it back together so I can say, aha. You know, I just don't think that they were doing that. And so like when I read it as though it's telling me something about what reality is rather than what it's made of compositionally. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm tracking.
And so getting to the flood more specifically, I think what that is trying to express not only a historical shared memory of the region and also perhaps something that happened globally. If it did happen globally, I can't say that I'm convinced either way on that. I think that if you just went to the text, I believe the word is aritz. It means basically like land, right? Which is, I mean, for all intents and purposes, they're not saying the planetary body that we call the Earth, the third rock from the sun. That's not what they meant anyway. So I think the whole thing becomes kind of an odd dispute. But when you
just to clarify, the word in itself meant Jerusalem. Literally, if you said the Heretics to a Jew, you mean Jerusalem?
Like that, yeah, that specific land.
That's the range of the word sometimes, yeah.
Well, the thing is though, even in the modern world, if you look at a global map and you stretch it out so that it's this like rectangular shape that we have when we have posters of a map, what's at the very center of the earth? It's Jerusalem still, like to this day, which is a really weird thing for humans to hold on to all this time. Like it's such a weird thing. Like there's no reason, technically speaking, why Jerusalem should be the center of the earth.
Right.
Except for that's the center of the earth. And it's been made clear by the most important document ever created. And it's like, I think that it's so, everything about our faith has become so implicit in everything we do and think that a lot of the time, I think we're just lost on it, you know? And as far as the flood goes, the way that I would understand the flood specifically, rather than just as a historical claim about the entire earth or a localized place, like I said, is more so what happens in the narrative space, what happens in the lived experience of humans when things are pressed ultimately to their limits. At the edge of things, like let's say you have two kingdoms. At the edge of each kingdom, there's going to be a boundary space that's shared, and that's the place where weird things happen, hybrids, you know, crosses between two things, right? But that's the story that happens there. You're at the edge of the earth, and what lives there? Hybrids, monsters, whatever. That's what happens at the edge of all narrative spaces too. So like think of any myth or any story or any, you know, like when you want to tell something extreme about something, you talk about the edge of things, the most extreme case. And we often do this in philosophy too, to try to make a point. Right? You find the very edge of the thing to find its extreme to make your point. It's like if God wanted to make a point about what it would be like if humans went all the way to the edge and just tried to knock themselves off. And he's like, look, I'm not going to let you get that far. I'm deleting it. We're starting over. You know, like that's basically what that story means to me. Is that's what happens when you reach the edge of the narrative space, and that edge encroaches so far that it becomes the center. The entire thing is edge. The whole world becomes margin. There's no center anymore. Nothing is ordered. It's all chaos. Well, that's a flood anyway. It's chaos. And so God says, fine, the appropriation for this will flood the earth. The chaos will consume it, and then it'll start over again, right? The land can rise up from the waters again and all this. It's like, that makes way more sense to me than most of the disputes that we have over it.
That is what you just said there is sort of creeping me out in a way, because literally last night I was watching the Truman Show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching the Truman Show, and that
in a long time.
because the guy who owns the show, right? Who, you know, because Truman's in that enclosed area, right?
Right.
So in other words, like a Tower of Babel scenario, like he's wanting where there is an edge, but he's wanting control where it's just that, but yet the God of the Bible is such that he encourages to go beyond the edge, so to speak, right? And
right, but not to bring the edge to the center, you know?
Exactly, yeah.
Or to bring the center to the edge. Both places have to exist. There's always going to be the fringe or the extreme of things. It's like, if you think about the high priest's garment, like, what was at the very fringe of his garment? It was the mixture of linen and wool. Well, that was forbidden. It's like, well, not at the fringe of things. That's where hybrids live. That's where boundaries break down. It's like, what happens when the margin becomes the whole world? All boundaries have been broken down. And then you have something as twisted as demonic children and giants and whatever kind of.
Check this out, Josh.
The toes with clay mixture, and then
right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
At the very fringe of our reality, general relativity even breaks down. So I mean,
that is true. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
well,
wild.
I think that actually
think about it. Yeah.
I think that's actually in keeping with the fact that the narrative pattern is what reality is actually made of, and the same author is the author of both.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's where it comes together for me. I think that's where it's the most profound, is that, like, the very rationality that holds reality in unity while also retaining its multiplicity. That's the same rationality that inhabited a body 2,000 years ago and died for me on the cross.
Beautifully said, and hence full of meaning to kenosis. You know, the Common Christi hymn, Philippians 2,
Mm-hmm.
like. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yeah,
and that's why I like I like thinking about these things, because we can break down so many different aspects. But for me, I noticed that people like to cling on to one aspect, and instead of seeing all these aspects and putting them together, there's a lot of truth in each and every aspect. So how do we marry them in a way? And I think Josh just beautifully described how that takes place, to me anyway.
You know, that makes
sense to me.
That's what we were talking about last night, is that there are different aspects to what we call reality. And another thing that we have noticed is that different groups, so to say, we won't name those who are in them, but they tend to elevate one of those things. And it's the same thing that has been going on, right? And they leave out the rest. And before you know it, you're saying it's only this or it's only that, whenever actually it's a mixture, of multiple different aspects. That's why I said on CSG all the time, and Josh knows this, that perspective is everything. And so you have to combine and marry, and as Rob taught me last time, concord these different things to really get to the bottom of truth. If that's your ultimate goal, you can read in whatever you want to. I am convinced that you can take any view and get an apologist to figure out a way to argue it from the Bible, and he can pretty well get it done, right? But at the same time, there is this, like I talked to David the other night about the inner witness of the Holy Spirit, and just how all of these different things play a part and how God works with us in our sanctification ultimately, to make us like Christ. But it's wild to me. It blows my mind every single day. And at the end of the day, it just makes me want to get on my knees and worship God, because you know what? I ain't got it figured out. I probably won't have it figured out, and I've got an eternity to do that. And I am okay with that. So, I mean, for real.
I think that the way that you can, like you just said, it's almost like every aspect of reality has this same pattern inherent in it, where there's going to be, Satan wants to play with the pendulums of extremes. He's just, you're going to be on this side or this side. Nothing in between. There can't be anything in between. And it's like, usually life is a lot more surprising and complicated than that.
Yeah.
And Satan would just rather you be an ignorant fool and throw out your neighbor because he disagrees with you. It's like, that's so much simpler than getting you to actually play the game and love your neighbor and figure out what it is that he needs and meet a need and be like, wow, oh, you can meet my, like, wow, we can rely on each other. This is a remarkable thing. Like, let's be in the same place. Like you guys are right now. Like, you're in the same place at the same time. It's like, I'm still very jealous, but it's really cool to see, like, even the way that the room is split in two, and one of you has a wood grain and the other one has a painted white wall. And it's like, you look like you're in two different spaces, but it's like a yin yang. That balance is key. That's funny. But yeah, you guys are even wearing opposing colored shirts and things. It's really interesting
with opposing backgrounds,
but with the
way
same
that all kind of like it's like, and this is the thing, is like, even Peugeot says symbolism happens. You guys are living out this weird balance thing in the same room. It's so intriguing.
It's nice, isn't it? Rob, what are your thoughts? I'm curious. What?
I completely agree. I was actually about to, it slipped my mind though. It's like I had a memory blank just then. I was going to mention, there's two.
It happens to me, bro, all the time. Part of getting old.
There's two quotes actually from Michael Heiser that I have taken to heart. The first one is, the world is stranger than you think, but thinking should not be strange. And then the second one is, what you know may not be so. I mean, it's pretty much repeating the first one, but yeah, like, the world is stranger than you think. So it's kind of like an affirmation because of prior knowledge and because of prior, I suppose you could say, surprises. Like, in other words, as we accumulate data points, we're always
build an expectation to be surprised, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the world is stranger than you think. It's kind of like a wise man, like a Solomon, 80-year-old Solomon moment. You know, the world is stranger than you think, son. And then there's an encouragement that if it's strange, then don't think that thinking is strange. Like, you know, so the world is stranger than you think, but thinking should not be strange. So it's like encouragement to, it can be hard work, but how interesting. The Christian religion is a text-based religion. It's a religion where you're reading, writing, you have one word throughout the Psalms that summarizes it all. Salah. Salah means to pause and contemplate that stanza you've just either sung or you read. It's not like Eastern mysticism where you yoke yourself into like a mindless, like Christianity is it's a thought, like renew the mind, Romans 12. So yeah, and Christian Europe is, the birth of the scientific method comes from Christian Europe.
Right.
So,
well, in the interest of what, because I listened, like I said, I was listening very carefully. Oh, hey, Terry wants to say hi to you guys. Hi.
Hi, Terry.
Hey, from Australia.
Oh yeah, Rob lives on the other side of the planet. He's upside down.
He's
in the upside down. Yeah. So no, I was gonna ask you, Rob, because like I said, I was listening very carefully to what you presented on the episode that we did together, and like I said, I didn't know you and I didn't know what to expect, and the way that you take this kind of roundabout way of explaining yourself, but I feel like there's more completeness to the explanation by the time you finally get round. And
that's just me, by the way. I can't help it. Yeah.
It reminds me very much of C.S. Lewis, because he does the same thing. He's like, you ask a question about this? Well, let me take you to the ground floor first, and then we'll find our way up. We'll take a spiral staircase. It'll be a lovely view, right? And then you have this kind of roundabout way of getting to the point. But it's like, I think the point that you were making and the point that I was making with the symbolic claim of reality being the place where symbolism happens, and that's why it doesn't have to be false to be myth. It can be more true because it's myth. It's actually reality condensed or distilled in some sense, where you get this kind of like I said, it goes beyond fact. Like, it's not like he's listing facts, the author of Genesis, when he goes through the flood account. It's like 14 sentences, and it's like 200 years of history or something in 14 sentences. It's like when you distill that much of reality down into that little space, I think you have truth, but in like the most potent form. Do you know what I mean?
Hence the snapshots, and hence, I mean, for example, Tolkien famously said that Christianity is the true myth.
Right, exactly.
He wasn't afraid using the word myth in that sense, and Tolkien purposely, like, this is because C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were good friends. In fact, Tolkien is the reason why C.S. Lewis even became a Christian.
That's right.
And
The
now
Inklings.
Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, do you see how fleshed out that is, right? Because he has the means and a narrative genius to make up this myth, based obviously being influenced from Christianity.
Well, he was also, that's the thing, is he was also very educated on other cultures, like mythic universes, their world building and the way that they saw everything. And he's very well rounded, very familiar, you know. And Lewis was like he was very masterful with ancient myths and his historicity of those kinds of things. And then Tolkien, being a language specialist, like I feel like the duo of them were able, like, those are two of my favorite authors, by the way. And I feel very drawn, like, even this, I keep, we're about to have dinner, huh? I feel very drawn to this, and it was something that my wife picked up for me, and it's actually really, it's incredible. It's the Rings of Legend. And this is actually a really remarkable book because it goes through the idea of rings being magic, rings being a symbol of a certain kind of thing, rings having like the kind of magic that rings have, and why that would be like they're the precedent set in ancient myths for the ring being the center of the world, right? And an evil ring being the center of the world, which is almost weirder than that, you know?
Right.
But I feel like the way that he said, like you said, he said that Christianity is the true, the myth that came true or whatever, right? And to think about that idea as like, okay, well, let's extend that into like all, like the same Christ that died on the cross is the one that claims to be creator. And so if we can pull that claim all the way back, like, why not do that? The entire thing is the myth that came true. We're literally living in that thing.
Right.
And then the eucatastrophe, like he coined that term, eucatastrophe, like a good catastrophe, like a surprising catastrophe, like, and you see this at the end of say Peter Jackson's, you know, with the eye. They think Frodo's killed. They just charge in the gates of Mordor. Notice gates of hell imagery, gates of Mordor.
Right,
like
exactly.
They're just going in. Might as well just fight it. And then a eucatastrophe, the eye starts to fall, and they realize, no, Frodo is alive, and he did succeed, and like, like, so if we did a Tolkien to Genesis, say 2 to 11, that's 70,000 years of you know, film we'd have to film versus
Fast
just
forward.
those 11 chapters that we have, right? So
Impossible. But that exactly. It's like thinking about the way that he, like, you can stretch that, even the human mind, like the imagination. Like I said, we're so finite, it's absurd. And yet God can use the raw materials we have to work with to communicate something that would otherwise be impossible to articulate. It's like the entirety of creation, and then to say, yeah, I did that. And then we like actually comprehend that to whatever degree. Like that alone is a miracle to me.
Yeah, I mean, telling it to people in the ancient Near East is a lot different than, I mean, we look at the leaps and how long it took us to get where we are. You know, I couldn't imagine telling that to somebody in detail, you know, like one right after another, like one event. Like and the intricacies in that event. The intricacies. That's right. That's right. I'm sorry. I can hear myself for the first time as I talk. So it's kind of like throwing me off.
Isn't it?
Turn your
But yeah.
volume down.
I can't. Yeah.
I
My
know.
sound's going through you. But
Anyway.
yeah. So I hear what you guys are saying.
So Tyler, what do you think of I guess that's my view of the flood. I mean, like, I hope that's enough of an answer to
Here's the
satisfy.
thing.
I don't really know, like, how.
Let me ask you this. You this, Josh, because I can think of some of the things that might be floating through our listeners' minds. It's the thing that jumps out to me anyway. Whenever you say myth, you don't necessarily mean did not happen, right? Fiction. No. That's not what we're talking about whenever we're talking about myth. And it seems like that is to me anyway, and we can talk about this if you guys want to, but a straw man that, that myth is equivalent to did not happen, did not take place. Right,
exactly. Like, a symbol doesn't have to be a useful fiction. I think people are wrong to do that. Right. They kind of have this assumption that because something's a symbol, it's fiction, like by default, but it's useful for a point.
Yeah.
Like visual analogy or whatever. And it's like, I don't think that that's what's actually happening. Like I said, it's almost like because reality does behave itself along a certain tendency, let's say, right? And so it's like, like one symbol that I think if you have any half a brain, you can recognize because of the way it's descripted, the description of it, right? You have the four horsemen. Can you name a time in human history the four horsemen haven't been galloping toward us? Like,
since
really?
Creation.
Like the entire time, right? And if you think about it, it's a proper cyclical kind of representation of what you're always going to portray when you think about reality as this larger picture. It's like, what's happening? Why are we so afraid? Well, this has always been here. It's like, why do we have pictures of things like Grim Reapers, right? It's like these pictures come from somewhere. They don't just like magically appear. I mean, maybe they do, but that wouldn't be magic in the same way that we would kind of think of magic in a silly way, right? Like,
right.
The fact that it's funny because Tim Stratton mentioned this in the episode is like, magic. Like, I do magic all the time. I move inanimate objects with my mind. Look at this organic matter I'm controlling with my mind, right? Like, you want to call that magic, fine, whatever. The idea is that can extend out into the universe past your vessel, whatever. But it's like, if that's the kind of world that we live in, and we've just found a way to explain it away so much that we no longer have faith in it, that the world can be re-enchanted in some sense. Like, you can really be like, no, like, God wants me to be like him. He wants me to be like him. He says that when I take and I eat, that it becomes part of me, right? In the same sense that, like, biology would say, you take, you eat, it becomes part of you, you use it, it becomes subservient to your head and part of your body, and you use it. It's like, fine. Christ offered the same thing to us. Come, be in me, be part of my body. I'll be the head. You do the work, my work. Don't worry. I'm in charge here. You can trust me, right? Like, all of reality screams the gospel if you start thinking about it this way.
It's so funny that you bring that up, because you can literally think of anything, and in some way, shape, or form, any kind of symbol, it goes back to what you're talking about, right? It's recognizable by, this is how we can communicate. This is how we can all unite, in one sense, is through symbolism, right? It's how we can understand each other.
Yeah, it's how we understand each other, but it's like, it also informs what we do and how we act, what we say, things like that. Like, imagine almost everything you do is partially ritualized in some sense. Like, when you guys met each other, you probably shook hands and hugged.
Yep.
Why did you do that? Why didn't you spit on each other's shoes, punch each other in the arm? You try breaking those rituals and see what happens. I'm telling you, most of what you do is ritualized in the exact same sense. You live in that narrative space and you act it out, or else.
Yeah. Is that what we would just call the norm? Like, just living day to day, just going with the flow, so to say? Like, that.
And then there's something that comes along and disrupts your map hard enough that you have to interact with it. and that
it
becomes
throws
the
you
adventure.
off.
You either become the hero or the villain, and you're
Right.
going to live in that world. That's the world you live in.
Right. What's your
Well,
thoughts, bro?
man,
Talk
I'm just
to me,
taking it
man.
in, man. One of the things I was wondering is how Rob has such cool backgrounds.
Bro, share your secrets with us, friend. How do you get such cool backgrounds? How can we look like you?
We just want to be
I
like
use
you, man.
virtual.
Look at you.
Oh, that's dope. Wait a minute,
That is sick.
dude.
How and
That
why?
is sweet. Wait a minute.
So I
don't have
use
that, do
software
I?
called XSplit VCam.
I don't have
And
that.
you need
Down.
a
That's cool.
GPU that can, like, I don't actually have a green screen behind me. I can have, I mean, my room's pretty clean, but I could have a lot of muck. But if you have a GPU that can, it's not a graphic GPU, it's more of a computational power sort of GPU for computational physics. Like, if you have that, it's able to, and if you have also a good quality camera, you can isolate, and the algorithm of the software, you can actually outline this. There's one option here that says remove the chair. So if I click on this, see how the chair goes away? So
Oh wow, yeah,
now it's just me. But notice there is clipping though.
yeah.
But
Bro,
I
that
usually
is
keep
so
an eye on it.
cool.
I know. I get
Wow.
so much clipping with these virtual backgrounds. I don't even use them.
This is some cuneiform.
Yeah,
This
wow.
is so
Um,
cool. I don't know how to
Yeah.
do any of this
Yeah.
stuff.
Right.
Wow, that's
I like the
rad.
Yeah.
cuneiform.
Cool.
So that was one of the cool things that we saw, like a replica of the Rosetta Stone
Yeah.
at
Mhm.
the Museum of the Bible, and
What
this
What was the one that we saw that wasn't a replica? It was the tall one. I can't remember off the top of my head.
it was a Steely.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
It was a Steely. I forget which one. I've got a picture of it. I can look it up later, but it was some Steely.
I bring this up to introduce people to the
That
wheels
is
of
cool.
Ezekiel,
Ah,
to sort of
yeah.
a tongue-in-cheek trolling in some way with the fundamentalist
wheels.
Christians. So
Right.
yeah,
That's funny.
Josh has got to run and eat dinner, so that's cool, bro. You can run.
You can run. Absolutely.
We'll allow it this time.
say it, Josh. God bless you.
I'll still be here because I'm interested in being part of the conversation as long as you guys will have me. But
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Stay.
I do have to eat dinner real quick. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
Just
am
realized.
still interested to hear what you guys think about what I said, because it's kind of different, necessarily so, than most of the exegetical approaches or scientific approaches that we're all kind of used to as modern people. So I'm still interested in hearing about that.
I think before you go, just as my reflection on what you're saying is, and I appreciate where you're coming from, in the sense that maybe you're transitioning into a more open-minded, kind of like that realization, the world is stranger than we think, but thinking should not be strange. Like you're sort of you're enlarging the horizon by not being a micromanager with, is it a young Earth, strictly young Earth, and hence global thing, or is it an old Earth but hence local thing? Rather, you're just appreciating the meta narrative of the so-called myth in that Tolkien-like, which is in itself an entire different meal, and an entire different like cuisine and taste, and then you feel very, in fact, maybe it's because you've been eating the same food the whole time for too long. It's like you're giving this a shot, and so far you're finding it quite beneficial because because you're finding genuine growth in that, maybe theologically, but it doesn't neglect. You're not saying it didn't happen. You're just appreciating that meta narrative stuff.
Right.
And so then, yeah, it's like a heavy weight that's lifting off your shoulder, where it's like, okay, now I don't have to worry, so to speak, if it's a global flood or a local flood. The point is it's a flood, and what's going on with respect to the people and especially ultimately God and how he's working with this. And it's not just God, but also the other gods. And
What's the theological
um,
significance to the Israelites at that time? Like, what was the
sure.
point of it? Right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Rob?
Well,
Yeah.
it's also the case that what I'm doing is trying to be able to say the same reality that this distilled truth is being extracted or laden on top of is the same reality that I live in. This is an ongoing, this is not like a separate world. This is not Middle Earth. This is the earth we live on now that we're talking about. So that's what makes the story so particularly
it's right at that doorstep, is what you're
meaning
saying.
and depth for me personally. Is I have floods in my life where boundaries have broken down and I see the chaos coming. It might not be global, but it's my whole world, and for the exact same reason. That has the same, it has the same impact. I think I can see what happens when I do inordinate breakdowns of proper categories, and I see things break down. They fundamentally break down, and it's like that's the same thing that happens with my body when my nefesh leaves it, isn't it? It decomposes into its smallest parts and it breaks down.
Yeah.
Like that's what,
again,
every level.
Now that, since I'm writing on Daniel, what you just said there has made me think of something I like literally just then I didn't think of before. But in Ezekiel 26, Ezekiel prophesies of how Nebuchadnezzar, he uses flood language, like a flood and waves. He's speaking of the nations, like waves that will start to take over, and ultimately take over Tyre, and like, yeah, that's an amazing way of looking at it, because the exile is a form of a flooding. In this case, the Babylonians coming in, chasing Pharaoh Necho back to Egypt, but on their way, guess who's in the crossfire? Jerusalem. So the Babylonians are coming in, and like a flood in their own local vicinity, they're taken by the Babylonians, and they're war booty now. But God in his wisdom, what I find even more interesting is that he sort of then starts to work underground. In other words, he's using that opportunity because everything's taken back to Babylon through that flooding. And now that everything's back in Babylon, now it's again Yahweh versus Marduk. And Yahweh comes on top. Like it comes something as basic as food. Daniel and his friends saying, no, we want this diet. Because the other diet was dedicated to Marduk. And yeah, like systematically, the God of Israel just coming out on top, even in exile. Yeah, that's a very interesting way of looking at it. Where you
and him saving the remnant through that same flood, the way that he saved Noah in the ark. He is the ark. He's the protection. He's the thing in which we ride through the flood and we come out alive on the other side. Baptism is the picture of the same thing. You enter into death through Christ and you come out in his resurrection. You enter into his divine life. You participate in the divine life. You become part of the body. It's like that's the exact same symbol running its course through the entire scripture, and then past that into the early church, into everything else, like the whole world.
You just, when you're saying seed or preservation of a community, that's exactly Zechariah, where in Zechariah 3 he actually refers to Daniel's, like some scholars wonder if he's referring back to Daniel's 3 friends, because after Daniel 3 you don't hear of them anymore. And Zerubbabel, his name means seed out of Babel. So it's like that's exactly it, because Zechariah is a post-exilic, text, and yeah, like, yeah, that's another point you just raised. Sort of just, I connected that dot.
Yeah, like, also, honestly, Josh, like, I think it's a beautiful way how you describe it. I think your view is the whole narrative space view has a place. Absolutely. Now, I'm not throwing all my eggs in one basket. I think Robert said it right, where you're open-minded to it. like there's more to the story. There's more to the flood than what meets the eye, right? So there's more to the Bible than old earth, young earth. We've
Yeah,
got to dive
absolutely.
deeper. We've got to grab
Look,
all
here,
that low hanging fruit or whatever and examine it, and think through it all.
here's the thing. I'll say this. Practically speaking, do not, for Christ's sake, do not get caught up on this discussion and like condemn people based on their belief of old earth or young earth. Robert, something you said the last time you were on has stuck with me the entire time, and I hate it, bro. I really do. You said that people have literally condemned you based on your view of how the earth is, and that is so sickening to me. I absolutely hate it, and I apologize on behalf of any Christian that would ever claim that title, right? That should never be, in my opinion. And so,
Yeah, no, and for me, you just rise above it. I do pity those people, and yeah, it's in fact it depresses me not because of what's said. It's rather depresses me that here's an imager of God. Does he actually understand the ramifications of what he or she is saying? And simultaneously, what is his devotions? I have to wonder how does that person do the Christian devotions? Like, are they in prayer? Do they sing hymns? Do they have a church community to go to? Like,
it wouldn't seem that
yeah,
way.
so
You know what I mean?
Or they cluster with people that hold those fundamentalist views.
exactly.
That's even worse.
Yeah.
Like, at least with the former, you're kind of you're isolated. You're keeping it to yourself. You get a group of like-minded people like this that, and let me just ask you this. We're doing an open mic, right? Let me just ask you this. And David and I have talked about this. So, Rob, do you think that this conversation, though, I mean, yes, granted, these are, I would even say, tertiary issues. The age of the earth, it isn't secondary, it's tertiary, right? It's third. Do these topics, do they touch on fundamental primary issues like when death comes into play and all these different things? Is that the reason these people are going head over heels on these subjects? Because it can't be the subjects themselves, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's an interesting question. If I was to be very like raw and just raw, I suppose. The history of young Earth creationism in itself seems I suppose you could say the absolute diehard, very faithful young Earth creationists, the Henry Morris type or the John Whitcomb type or ultimately say the Ken Hovind type, and they do stem from an 1800s Seventh-day Adventist Ellen G. White model that it's like a house of cards that's then built up. Because Ellen G. White, she had visions of like a grand catastrophe, which then George McCreary Price, who was a fan of Ellen G. White, he took her teachings and ran with it, and he wasn't really well noticed. But then it was Henry Morris who, because of his scientific expertise, next to his name, he, along with John Whitcomb, he then, from the 1960s onwards, he then developed what is modern day young Earth creationism, and that just went like wildfire. But it's an American, unfortunately, and this is sort of like speaking as a non-American. I know America gets a lot of flack because a lot of weird has always just come from America. Mormons, Jehovah's Witness, Seventh-day Adventists.
We are the epicenter of crazies.
Like, it's just yeah, like Mary Baker Eddy, all that weird, Aleister Crowley, and
Do we got any
so
famous heretics from Australia, Rob? Is there any famous heretics?
only, well,
Come on, man, give me
well,
somebody. Who?
Ken Ham.
no, I was gonna say
Ken
I was
Ham.
gonna say Ken Ham because
You gotta own
because
him.
yeah, but
Hillsong.
yeah,
Hillsong.
I mean Australia's like, British. It's a colonized country,
Yeah.
because the Brits came through, and
Sure.
but yeah, so then I can see why young Earth creationists, like a textbook young Earth creationists,
Jason Lyle.
will
Okay.
make it this, presuppositionalism then creeps into this, right? Like, for example, I heard when you were interviewing IP, and IP was categorically just saying, yeah, to me the presup method is just lazy. But yeah, like, once they believe that you have presup as the foundation, then they just have to presuppose that this is true, and then that's it. Everything else is secondary if in an entertainment sort of way. So then that's why I'm not surprised why they say things like, "Oh, you're living in sin if you believe in evolution," because their model is literally the flood changed everything. They literally believe that. So, for example, David,
Right.
in one of those prior discussions you were having with Dane, I think it was, I think his name is,
Yeah,
where
Dane.
he asked the question, when God curses the ground, what was the condition? What was the ontological conditions in Genesis 2 versus Genesis 3 onwards, right? And you didn't know the answer, but you sort of just said, pump the brakes. We can't jump to conclusions. There could be an answer. There could be, in your words, you said there could be an old Earth answer to that.
Are you talking about the thorns and thistles thing that Dane brought up?
Yeah, right.
Gotcha.
Now notice. Now notice. I'll give you what the Bible scholars will say, and notice that just that one observation in itself changes it. It's literally a fork in the road.
Mm-hmm.
So Dane has interpreted to mean that God changes the ontological thermodynamics and so on of the entire system based on the actions of Adam and Eve, so that now death is a possibility. Otherwise, prior, people like Jason Lyle and so on will say, oh, there was no such thing as decay and death, and hence there's no death before the fall, that phrase, right?
Right.
So now notice it comes to and interpreting that phrase in Genesis 3 where it's like, cursed is the ground because of what you've done, right? Now, Bible scholars will point out, and this is where it gets very interesting. Literally in the Hebrew, it's cursed is the ground because of you. And it's cursed in the sense of an ongoing action based on what you will be doing. So think of it like this. Like, imagine you buy a sports car, like, let's say a Lamborghini or something, and then you're known to abuse whatever you buy, I suppose, right? And then a friend of yours comes and says, "Hey, cursed is that car's engine because of you." Now,
Right.
when he says cursed is that car engine, he's not changing the thermodynamics and the efficiency of that engine by uttering those words. He's just saying, now, so in this case with Adam, now in sin, the ground is now cursed because from this day on forward, the way you won't be able to treat the land efficiently like you did in Eden. Now that you're cast out, there'll be a more propensity of thorns and thistles to grow because of it through sin. The mismanagement of earth will accumulate.
I think I'm following. Yeah.
And that's
So
the old Earth answer.
that's how old Earth creationists, but the old Earth creationists will use that answer because that's how the ancient Near Eastern people perceived it. And so therefore now notice the fork in the road. So Dane is saying God is the one that curses the ground. And then now notice you have a whole build-up of argumentation and perspectives.
Yeah.
Whereas with me, it's like, I already know that there's death before the fall, and death continues on, but it gets worse. The chaos coming, the struggle with chaos gets worse and worse and worse. Just in closing on that point, bring up, if you have your Bibles open.
Oh, I can. Hold on.
Paul himself actually says what ancient Near Eastern scholars will point out. So in Romans 8, verse 20, what does Paul actually say? This I find, this particular verse, I find young creationists, they sort of don't read it carefully, or carefully enough.
I've got it in the NET.
Okay.
For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of God who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will also be set free from the bondage of decay into the glorious freedom of God's children. For we know that... Okay.
Yeah. So, you know how it says willingly? The creation was subject to futility, but not willingly.
Right.
Now, that translation is sort of obscure. That literally in the Greek, the creation has become subject to futility, though not by anything it did. The one who subjected it did so in the certainty that blah 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 blah, that the creation will also join in resurrection life.
Yeah.
So notice the creation has been subject to futility. Now notice it. Paul's not saying when that occurred. He's just saying the creation has been subject to futility, and I can point out and say, yeah, all the way back to Genesis 1 verse 2, the tohu wabohu, right? That chaos conditions. So the creation's been subject to futility, and he clarifies, though not by anything it did. So, in the young earth's view, Adam is part of the creation. If Adam is the cause for the futility of the creation, then that's a contradiction with Paul, because Paul's saying the creation didn't cause the futility. So not by the creation is subject to futility, but not by anything it did. Adam is part of it. So there's the creation is already subject to it because God has a purpose in mind to bring about the outcomes that we know, like, Jesus, the resurrection, and so on. At a more philosophical level, Leibniz, the contemporary to Newton, he proposed what's known as the best of all possible worlds.
Right, yeah.
And I absolutely love this. This is one of the reasons why I became a Christian, is this realization that if there is an omni-God, then whatever he creates, by definition, can't be him ontologically.
Right.
So what's one of the facets that makes him omni? Perfectionism. For example, he's eternal and he's perfect, and no death. So he can't create another Yahweh because see, the young earth creationist argumentation is the creation was perfect. But hang on, then you're saying creation is Yahweh. But you can't notice contradiction. You can't create like a thing that's like Yahweh, because see, creating Yahweh, that in itself is a contradiction of terms. Yahweh is uncreated, and not only is he uncreated, he's by definition perfect and all those things, right? So Leibniz's point is, you have this emergence, this bararing of the heavens and earth, and ontologically, since it's less than Yahweh, so what's natural to the system is unnatural to God, and what's natural to God is unnatural to the system. So things like death, decay, suffering, finiteness, that is natural to the system because it is that is the only way it can be right from the start. So now notice then the gospel implications here. God knows that's an issue. That's what Paul's saying here. Notice Paul goes, so not by anything it did, but the one who subjected it did so in the certainty that the creation itself would also be set free from the corrupting bondage to share in the glorious freedom. So, when the Logos becomes incarnate, the human body, which is part of the, Jesus' body, which is part of the creation, experiences theosis, glorification, divinization, which means God, hence Revelation 21.
Mm-hmm.
You have a marrying of heaven and earth. So now God is transforming the finiteness of this creation to become into that omni attributes of what he is, perfect and so on, without death and without finiteness, and hence this New Jerusalem language. And so the gospel message, if you think about it, the gospel message is not just all about sin. It is to do with sin, but there's a grand, bigger cosmic thing going on in God's mind, which is he wants to cause theosis to what he knows was an inevitability right at the start.
Right.
He's like, okay, but I'm still going along with it because theosis is ultimately what I'm driving for with respect to this family that I've created to enjoy life with me. And if you go to Hebrews 2, this makes me very emotional. Like, if you go to Hebrews 2, this sort of wraps it all up.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you read from verse... Sorry?
No, I said I know where you're getting at. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going, man. It's good.
Yeah. Like, if you go Hebrews 2 verse 5, read from verse 5 down to, say up to 13. Like, read, because there's a psalm that's quoted, and I won't spoil it just yet, but there's a psalm that's quoted that Jesus quotes in the Gospels that's in this passage here. Not the psalm. I mean, Psalm 8 is quoted in verse 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah.
But later on, close to verse 13, there's another psalm that's quoted. But yeah, read from verse 5 down to 13.
Okay. For he did not put the world to come, but about which we are speaking, under the control of angels. Instead, someone testified somewhere, and here's the psalm: what is man that you think of him, or the son of man that you care for him? You made him lower than the angels for a little while. You crowned him with glory and honor. You put all things under his control. For when he put all things under his control, he left nothing outside of his control. At present, we do not yet see all things under his control, but we see Jesus, who was made lower than the angels for a little while, now crowned with glory and honor because he suffered death, so that by God's grace he would experience death on behalf of everyone, for it was fitting for him, for whom and through whom all things exist, in bringing many sons to glory, to make the pioneer of their salvation perfect through sufferings. For indeed, he who makes holy and those being made holy all have the same origin, and so he is not ashamed to call them brothers and sisters, saying, I will proclaim your name to my brothers. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. And he says, I will be confident in him. And again, here I am with the children God has given me. Therefore, since the children share in flesh and blood, he likewise shared in their humility, so that through death he could destroy the one who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and set free those who were held in his slavery all their lives by their fear of death. For surely his concern is not for angels, but his concern is for Abraham's descendants. Therefore he had to be made like his brothers and sisters in every respect, so that he could become a merciful and faithful high priest in things relating to God, to make atonement for the sins of the people. For since he himself suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help those who are tempted.
Woo! Now,
Good job.
what psalm did
Thanks.
Jesus quote on the cross?
Father, forgive them for...
No,
no.
where he's,
Father,
my
why
God,
we-
my God.
Yeah, my God, my God,
Yeah.
my God.
Right.
Psalm 22.
Psalm 22, right?
Yeah. Psalm
The
22.
only other time Psalm 22 is quoted in the New Testament is in verse 12. from the same
Yeah.
psalm, I will announce your name to my brothers. I will praise you within the congregation. So notice the breakdown of this. So verse 5, for he did not put the coming world as we are talking about under the control of angels. So you have in ancient Near Eastern speak God and his divine counsel, Psalm 82. But then he creates you and me, this particular creature. He has a very special, or he wants to have a very special relationship with us. Hence, our reaction should be like what the author of Hebrews is saying. Okay, you didn't put the coming world into control of angels, right? But
Right.
that's the point of Psalm 8. It's like, what is man that you should remember him and take notice of him? And you made him a little lower than the angels,
Yes.
but you crowned him with glory and honor, and you put everything on his feet.
We were
So then
talking
it's
about
like,
this today.
yeah,
David and I were talking about this exact same thing today, bro, because I hear you.
wow. Okay.
Why did God create the earth? It's to put mankind, to let them to fill the earth, and that in and of itself, in an ancient Near Eastern context with the image of God, that's a whole
Mhm.
other conversation. God filling the earth with his image and what exactly that means, right? But God's plan has always been for mankind to subdue the earth, to, as Josh Davidson would put it, to co-participate with synergistically, right? And together with each other, right? God is working with mankind to subdue the earth, right? That's all part of the plan. And so I just find that extremely, like, that's where I love, and I hate that he's gone, but that's where I love Josh's narrative structure, is because in that sense, he's dead on with it. Granted, there's more to it than that, like we were talking about as well. But yeah, we were talking about, bro, that's crazy that you brought that up. But what are your thoughts, man? Like,
Dude, it's reflective of what we've been talking about all week with death and everything.
Yeah.
Every single thing. You
Yep.
know? I mean, it fits into that. It's kind of like this was planned tonight.
And notice
Go ahead,
this continuous language of suffering and death, where again it doesn't surprise God. He's not surprised by it. It's like, yeah, verse 10, it was fitting that God, and then again going back to the creation, reminding the reader about the creation, for it is fitting that God, for whom and through whom everything exists, should make the pioneer of their salvation perfect through suffering. So like through the chaos coming right from the start. So in other words, the fall, again, it's not just one fall, it's like 3 successive falls that then finally God's able to start with Abraham in Genesis 12 moving forward. And so then that's his plan to glorify many children.
That's where you had mentioned that last time, and we did not get a chance to get into it. If you just want to summarize it, I know we've went for an hour and 20 right now. Like, I'm having a blast. I can talk all night. Like, I'm good to go. But can you summarize what you mean? Because as just ask any person, like, in my opinion, it might be different, right? But if I ask someone, hey, how many falls? Well, what are you talking about? First of all, is what I'm going to get. But people would say 1, right? Adam and Eve fell in the Garden of Eden. That's the big one that everybody's familiar with. The other one is, well, one that the Bible is kind of silent on, right? The angels fall. Now, are you talking about the angels fall? Is there another one with that? Or is these 2 different things completely?
Yeah, so Genesis 1 to 11 is like the preface of Genesis,
right?
Hence using the Tolkien language, it is a myth or mythic or proto-history myth or whatever you want to call it. That again, if you're a Jew and if you're thinking like a Jew, why do we exist as a nation? Oh, we need we need a long time ago in a galaxy far away moment, just to bring you up to speed. That's the first 11 chapters. Bang, chapter 12 moving forward. So
right, because it really condenses down at Abraham, right? Like,
right.
That's where you see the shift.
It In fact, to use a New Testament analogy, say Mark's gospel.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jesus' ministry is 3.5 years, or 3 years and a bit. And notice that Mark goes from year-long gaps to suddenly months, then weeks, and then hours. Like hours in this case by the time you reach the cross. It's the same sort of thing with Genesis. It's like Genesis 1 is epochs of time, from a scientific point of view, 13 billion years, right? But then Genesis 2, bang, it jumps. Now it's a lot more local, but still quite a far back.
Right.
Then Genesis 6, that's about 12,000 years ago, if you look at it scientifically with the flood. Then Genesis 11 is about 7,000 years ago. And then Genesis 12 with Abraham moving forward. So, yeah. Now, with respect to the falls, when you take the whole thing as a whole, one thing I just don't understand with young creationists is that they see Genesis 3 as this ultimate big, like, oh my gosh, this is what's caused everything to happen, and so on. And yeah, Paul does
Right.
make that a point in Romans, through one man death came, and through sin and so on. But then in other areas in his writings, he's not afraid, or even other writers like Peter and Jude, they're not afraid, how interesting, to speak about a different fall back in between the Genesis 2 and 11 bracketing. So Peter and Jude never mention about Adam's fall, but they mention about another fall that took place that brings about the disasters that Paul says applies to Adam. And that's the angels that fell. So that's Genesis 6. Then Luke, say in Acts 2, or say in Luke 10, so don't forget Luke is the same author of both Acts and Luke. So in Luke 10, the very first verse says, Jesus sends out 70 other disciples. Now this is very specific and deliberate. Why 70? And in that same chapter in Luke 10, Jesus, like when those 70 come back to Jesus then utters the famous, I saw Satan fall like lightning.
Right.
70 is the table of nations. If you count the nations in Genesis 10, they number 70. And in the ancient Near East, again, the 70 nations is just the Mediterranean region. And the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11, and the fall that took the third fall that happens at the Tower of Babel event, is then summarized in Deuteronomy 32 verse 8, where it's a summary verse that, in my opinion, is like, if you want one verse that summarizes the entire biblical story, it's Deuteronomy 32 verse 8. And verse 9. Verse 9 is like God's response to what happens in verse 8, and that is, God disinherits the nations to the other gods. And then verse 9 is, but he's kept to himself a small portion, which is Jacob. And so it's a lot more cosmic. It's not just Adam and Eve eating
I've got it
fruit
here,
and
Rob.
then, yeah.
I've got it here. Can I read it real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided up mankind, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the heavenly assembly, the angels.
That's the NLT, right?
This is the NET, the New English Translation.
Okay.
For the Lord's allotment is his people, Jacob is his special possession. Yep.
There you go. So when he disinherits the nations at when? Babel.
Yeah.
So notice you don't. It's not just Genesis 3. Yes, you have a divine rebellion going on there. The Nakash figure, which, by the way, do you have the International Standard Version there with you?
I do.
Can you access?
I do.
Okay, open Genesis 3 verse 1 in the International Standard Version. See what it says, because they faithfully translate Nakash how it should be translated.
Hold on.
It's known as the ISV.
ISV. Yeah.
Deuteronomy 32.
No, Genesis 3 verse 1.
Oh. Get some like elevator music. You know.
Can't wait to see your reaction when you read it.
Right. All right. Now, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Genesis 3:1, New International Version. Now the serpent was more crafty.
No, the International Standard Version.
Man,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Hold on.
Yeah.
It's got to be on here. ISV.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Genesis 3:1. Now the shining one was more clever than any animal of the field that the Lord God had made. He asked the woman, did God actually say you are not to eat from any tree of the garden?
That changes the whole thing, right? Like, yeah, we're reading it as snake,
Right.
but it's a divine being. It's one of those council members of God's hierarchy that, you know, when Paul says angel of light, and like the word has three forms. So as a noun, it means snake.
Yeah.
As a verb, it means to divinize, and as an adjective, it means to shine. He's doing all three things, and the Israelite that chose Nakash to define as being, snake fits the category perfectly. Not ontologically that it's a snake, but rather like a snake.
Yeah.
And hence this language of being cast to the ground, and you know, but yeah, like notice it's a divine rebellion going on in Genesis 3.
Yeah.
Another divine rebellion in Genesis 6. Another divine rebellion in Genesis 11, because Deuteronomy 32 clarifies it's going to the other gods.
Right.
You know, the nations. So now notice, when Luke is tempting Jesus, I mean, when Satan is tempting Jesus in Luke.
Yeah.
Right.
What does Satan do specifically to Jesus? He tempts him about the nations. Right. Hey, you know the nations you disinherited back in Tower of Babel? Because that's the culmination of all those prior falls. I'll give them back to you if you bow down to me. Now Satan doesn't know the plan.
Right.
How Jesus will get the nations back. So Satan falls into Jesus' trap by killing Jesus, and by killing Jesus, Acts 2 takes place, and guess what? When you count the nations in Acts 2, it's the same 70 nations that was lost at Babel.
Right.
They're all coming back at Pentecost, and 3,000 get saved. And then those 3,000 go back into the nations to spread the gospel.
Right. It's like a complete reversal, like what what Heiser describes. And I've been trying to get him back on, because we had a podcast scheduled with him. But that's whenever he was diagnosed with, cancer and started taking chemo, and we never got a chance to. But what you're describing is exactly what he wrote about in Reversing Herman. It's a complete reversal of what happened at that time at Babel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My question is, who in the world, and this is kind of diverting from that a little bit, but who gave Satan the authority anyway? Was it God? Are all of the nations, is all of the world under Satan, the prince of the power of the air, right? The spirit that energizes the sons of disobedience, as Paul puts it. Is that how that works? Or what are the rulers of the nations doing now?
Well, Tyler, that's going to have to be saved for the next time. We have wives we promised to make s'mores with, and kids to make s'mores with. So we will get on it next time.
This is not my happy
Rob,
face.
you have to come back.
Let's discuss it. That's a fantastic topic to discuss. Yeah.
It is. And that question just is a springboard, bro. It really is.
Message me, Rob.
Yeah. I mean, we go through it all. We could probably do a 3-hour show on all this stuff. Really. Absolutely.
Philip Rice writes,
and I got questions for you too.
With the use of Heiser's theology
that I've been gathering as you've been talking. So we'd love to have you back. I also want to hear what you had to say about Hugh and his recent talks about the Egyptians and how they understood the stars better than what we give them credit to. You know.
Oh, I agree with him on all that. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right on. So, guys,
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, man.
No worries,
We
yeah.
really appreciate you being here, and yeah, we're gonna finish our vacation.
Okay.
It's 11
Let's
o'clock
do it.
here, so the kids are gonna be eating s'mores to stay up for about 30 more hours and then crash hard. But Tyler, why don't you close us out, man?
I appreciate it, man. Like, I appreciate you, Rob, for coming on here and
Blessings to
talking
you
with
guys.
us.
Yeah.
You too, man.
Message me later, and we'll finish our conversation. But yeah,
Mhm.
anytime you want to come back on, man, just let me know, and we will catch you next time on Faith Unaltered. Until then, good night, God bless, and stay like Christ.